Well, following on from his superb win in Baku, that's pole position for Sergio Checo Perez in the Miami Grand Prix, in front, you can be sure, of a lot of Mexican fans in Florida. What a day for him. I said yesterday, possibly to the ire of some, that Sergio is playing a really good role as a wingman for Max, and should Max have any sort of issue at all, he's going to be right there to take advantage of it. Well, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I mean that in a very positive way, and that's exactly what happened today. Sergio was brilliant at the beginning of Q3, 26.8, purple, P1, but Max Verstappen, it's the first time I've seen Max, double world champion, through those high-speed S's at the beginning of the lap, absolutely overloading the car on entry. He was presumably trying to go through flat or doing something dramatic that he hadn't done in Q2. But he held everything together. But all the things I was talking about yesterday, just asking far too much of the car, loading it up in a very ungainly way. And he got out of it okay, but by the time he then went into turn 7, the long left-hander, he had too much load on the car. He normally goes in with the car absolutely settled, had load on the car, and just ran wide, and that was it. The lap was destroyed. He came straight in, as he logically would, to put on the final new set of Pirelli red softs, but he never did the lap, because Charles Leclerc, at the beginning of his quick lap on the second run, and he'd also made a mistake. He'd been really quick in the Ferrari sectors 1 and 2, but then blew it right at the end of the lap, hit the wall, touched the wall in an innocuous place, really. I mean, he'd got the lap in the bag, potentially the pole. Really, really good lap by Leclerc. But he blew it as well. Came in. He was out there then on his new set. And he, on exactly the same corner where Max ran wide, Leclerc went off the track into the Tech Pro barrier, and that was it. Got to say here, it was exactly the same place. He did the same thing yesterday. So what is going on with two of the best racing drivers in the world, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc? Just an unbelievable session, I think, from that perspective. And going to take a while to have to think about that one, exactly what has been going on. All you can say is there was a lot of crosswind today. It was a much windier day, qualifying day in Miami. But then again, drivers like Leclerc and Verstappen have the vocabulary to be able to handle the variables, as I always say. But it wasn't that. It was Sergio Perez that put the lap together and absolutely deserved that pole. Really, really good lap. Another point I'd like to make, Australian Grand Prix, I had a bit of a rant about F2 when they stopped qualifying. I think it was 4 minutes from the end of qualifying, by which time I'd say at least 50% of the field had not done their second runs. And I made a big thing then about how they shouldn't just arbitrarily do that. And they should extend the qualifying session just to enable everybody to have their 2 runs. It's not that big a deal to do that. And because you don't really want to have motorsport where you just gamble on maybe somebody's going to go off and suddenly a session is only a 1-run session. And I think they should have done that today. I'm surprised they didn't, actually. Red Bull just called it quits. As soon as the red came out, Sergio, you're on the pole. Not even any discussion about going to the stewards to try to get the session extended. And I think that needs to be looked at, because here's a driver going off and it's causing, I suppose you could say, TV deadlines and all that stuff. They've got to finish it. But we've seen before that things get extended if they have to. To me, there was obviously nobody got in their second runs, and that was it. It was all based on the first runs, and just for the record, it was 58.30, 58. So there was just enough time to do one lap for everybody. They needed to have taken a chunk more time, but it's not as if there are a lot of packed up support races in Miami. There's W Series and there's North American Porsche Super Cup, and that's it. So they could, if there was some sort of schedule drama, they could easily have taken a bit of time out of there. Anyway, they didn't do that. So the grid is defined by, of course, Q1 and Q2, but then in Q3 is defined by what everybody did in the first runs, and nobody was out there going quicker than Sergio Perez on those first runs. So Sergio on the pole, 26.8. Fernando Alonso on the front row in the Aston Martin, really, he was struggled in Q1, got through okay, no problem, but didn't look to be a threat. Q2, he was right there. Q3, right there as well from the get-go, 27.2. P3, Carlos Sainz, he's looked good all weekend. He looked good yesterday, as I say, good fuel run. And he played a sort of Sergio Perez role at Ferrari to the Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. It's bizarre how the two, if you like, wingmen of Ferrari and Red Bull are the two that are up there at the front of the grid, and it's going to be a pretty tough race now for Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc from where they are on the grid. Kevin Magnussen, one of the big stories of Q3. Nico Hülkenberg, very unlucky, very quick in Q2, just failed to make it through to Q3, but Kevin Magnussen also did a really good job in Q2, and in Q3 on that first run, 27.7 when it really counted. He will be starting P4, and Pierre Gasly 27.7 in the Alpine. Good to see him finally getting a good run as well. And therein lies the news. Mercedes slower now, not only slower than Aston Martin, but slower now than Haas-Ferrari and Alpine, sinking backwards. Lewis Hamilton did not even make it out of Q2. Couldn't get a decent lap, made mistakes, hit the wall at one point. Not his fault, really. It was Kevin Magnussen caught him unawares, going incredibly slowly, and Lewis, rather than hit him, had to brush the wall on the right in Q1. Just got through with a really good lap, right under pressure in Q1 into Q2. But Q2, as he said afterwards, they sent him out too late. That's what he felt anyway. And he was 0.2, 0.3 slower than George Russell, who just got through into Q3, but could not out-qualify Pierre Gasly or Kevin Magnussen. So a horrendous day for Mercedes. One of the worst days for Mercedes since I can't even remember. So a really, really black day for Toto Wolff and the team, who were constantly being told are working absolutely flat out. But many, many people have been saying, why 6, 8, 10 months ago didn't they just scrap this car and do a Red Bull replica and just go motor racing, because they're just sinking without trace at the moment. And it's very sad to see a team with those facilities, a team with those sorts of personnel getting worse, not better, relative to the opposition. And to see Lewis not even make it out of Q2 was just ridiculous. Charles Leclerc will start behind George Russell. Esteban Ocon also good in the other Alpine. So Alpine had both cars after a horrendous weekend in Baku. Both Alpines in the top 10. Let's have a look at some of the other. And Valtteri Bottas, I should say, also in the top 10. Alfa Romeo, really good. All those updates that they brought to the Australian Grand Prix, which didn't seem to have much impact in the race in Melbourne, even though they looked quite good on the Friday. Didn't have any impact in Baku either. But here in Miami, they're working, and the car suddenly is a bit of a race car. And worth pointing out, because of course it is some sort of measuring stick, that in not making it through to Q3, Lewis Hamilton was out-qualified by Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Valtteri, his former teammate at Mercedes, of course, by nearly half a second, by 0.4. Unbelievable. And that'll be great. That's great for Valtteri. It's great for Alfa Romeo. But that is just underlining the sort of trouble that Mercedes and, of course, Lewis Hamilton are in. George Russell always seems now to be able to put in a lap 1 or 2 tenths quicker than Lewis, which has to be demoralising and demotivating for Lewis as well. So let's hope he has a good race tomorrow, just for the sake of Miami Grand Prix and motor racing, I think. Let's have a look at going back to Q1, who didn't make it out of Q1. Having looked good yesterday, and we've seen this before, McLaren looked quite good on Friday. They do lots of things and you get quite positive about them. Neither McLaren made it out of Q1. Can you believe that? Lando Norris, 0.1, 0.2 quicker than Oscar Piastri. Not a lot in it. You got to say, for a bad car, Oscar Piastri's doing quite a good job. So they didn't get out. The highlights of Q1, Carlos Sainz was P2. Kevin Magnussen already showing his potential with P5. Lewis P6 in the end, that really good lap under pressure. But Valtteri Bottas, he was only just a little bit quicker than Valtteri Bottas. And Alonso in Q1 down in P12. So it was an iffy moment for Aston Martin with traffic and how to get the best from Fernando on that. Q2 highlights there: Fernando Alonso P3, Sergio Perez P5, Kevin Magnussen P9. Kevin Magnussen P9, 3 tenths quicker than Nico Hülkenberg, and George Russell just making it through in P10. And both Alpines, as I say, very impressive throughout the afternoon in that respect. And then we had what happened in Q3. It will go down as the pole position for Sergio Perez. It'll go down as the qualifying session in which Max Verstappen did not register a time. He'll be starting 9th because he was quicker than Valtteri Bottas, who also didn't register a time in Q2. So Valtteri will be 10th. So Max 9th, Charles Leclerc 7th, and Sergio Perez on the pole from Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. What a race that's going to be. Not sure how easy or not it is to overtake here. I don't think it's anything like as straightforward as Baku. So, as I say, it's going to be an issue. And it's going to be an issue because, for Max that is, because it's going to be very easy to damage front wing end plates and little bits and bobs, hit wheels, and some very, very tight bits of road here as well. Also worth noting that Sergio Perez hit a wall, glanced a blow on the wall in Baku, turn 15, I think it was, just on entry. Turned, going into a left-hander, just ran too wide on entry because he's got this slightly longer corner entry than Max Verstappen. And he did exactly the same in qualifying in Q2. Hit the wall again, doing the same thing, hitting it on the outside, going into a left-hander. So he needs to watch that. He got away with it again. Says a lot about Red Bull, says a lot about Pirelli. But that is a characteristic of Sergio Perez, that he does this sort of slightly wide approach going into any corner, a long corner we call it. Let's just have a look at some of the homework that was done in FP3 this morning. Nobody did any long runs apart from Ferrari. It was all to do with soft tyre runs, just getting the tyre balanced and understanding what it was going to do with the additional crosswind that was out there. So they're the top speeds. That's in the order in which they finished FP3 in terms of the soft tyre runs, and they're the top speed. So you can see that Red Bull have, going into this race, a considerable, this is in DRS obviously, the DRS Open, 340, the two Red Bulls. Then the next quick is really impressive from Alpine, to have a car that's suddenly a top 10 car, Q3 car, and it's really good in top speed, 337. Mercedes, 337, 335 for Lewis Hamilton. You know, they could have taken some of that away and given their drivers a bit more grip. Both of them complained about hopping and just a really, really difficult ride. I'm not sure if it comes under the heading of aerodynamic vertical oscillation, but the car's sort of hopping around and bouncing around and just very unpleasant to drive. And neither driver seemed in any way happy with it, but George got the better of it. Alex Albon in the Williams, as I say, normally, as I said yesterday, Williams would be super quick, but they've sort of dialed the car back, given Alex Albon a bit more downforce. He drove really well today, I thought. And Logan Sargent was only 0.3 slower than Alex as well. So he should be given some credit for that, even though I think in terms of the results, he appears last. The gap was not that big, and Alex P11. Nico Hülkenberg 335. You can see the Haas is nicely dialed in there in terms of its top speed and what it can do around the lap in terms of downforce as well and grip levels. And the Alfa Romeo as well, 333, right up there with the Alpines and ahead of the Fernando Alonso Aston Martin 329, which is a little bit of a disappointment from what we saw there yesterday. But in terms of one run on soft tyres, obviously it's not a factor, but in the race, it could well be that the Aston is struggling a little bit in terms of top speed. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, similarly, not that quick relative to, say, even the Alpines, let alone the Red Bulls. So that will be a defining factor as well, of course. The only other thing that I think is worth looking at, the only team which did, well, the only cars, only two drivers, and that it was a team that did any long runs in FP3 were Ferrari. Perhaps a bit of overkill from Ferrari in doing that, but remember last year they made the mistake. They were really quick in qualifying. They never did any fuel running at all. They never ran the yellow, I don't think, and I don't think they ever ran the hard tyre. They certainly didn't run fuel. So this year, both drivers are out there doing fuel runs. And I, as I say yesterday, I was very impressed with Carlos Sainz's regularity, his consistency, 33.6, 32.5, 33.1, 33.6, 33.5, 33.3. And he balances quite well with Charles Leclerc, who's a little bit quicker initially, but towards the end of the run, Carlos is right there. That's a good thing from Carlos Sainz's point of view. He looks to be in a nice rhythm, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes tomorrow, starting from P3 with Leclerc so far behind him. Nothing like that to give you a sudden extra boost of confidence. And I put there in just as a reminder in red what Max Verstappen was doing with fuel load on Friday, and you can just see how much quicker they were. Bearing in mind he was also on the medium tyre, and Ferrari were doing these runs on the soft tyre, which means they may not have had a full load of fuel either, who knows. But you can see at the bottom there, as I said yesterday, Max on the medium tyre with a fuel load, unbelievably quick. But whether he'll be able to take advantage of all that now from where he's starting on the grid, on a street circuit where there's some very narrow bits and it's not difficult to damage the car in a histrionic first lap, then, you know, if Max can get through the first lap with the car in one piece without it damaged in any way, then we got a motor race. But the odds of that happening now, I think, are relatively small from where he is on the grid, because he's got, he's got guys like Ocon, who's pretty aggressive around him, Alex Albon. Obviously Charles Leclerc's going to be going for it just in front of him as well. There may be some issues going on there, so not a great place for Max to be starting from. Quite a messy place to be starting from, actually. So right now, got to say, Sergio Perez looks to be in a really, really good position to win this Miami Grand Prix. And it'll be fun watching Fernando racing with all the cars around him, which are going to have a top speed advantage. But Fernando, never, ever count him out on anything. And if any slight glimmer of something, he's going to be right there. So potentially, he could do it as well. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow when I'll be back doing another video after the Miami Grand Prix. Thanks for watching.